Hi, I'm Dr. Nadine Thornhill. I'm an educator specializing in child and adolescent sexuality. For over a decade, I have been helping families have open, honest conversations with their kids and their teens about bodies, relationships, and more. This video was recorded on land which for thousands of years has been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Anishinaabe-Waki, and the Haudenosaunee. Today, this land is still home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and I am grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land. Today, we're going to talk about how you can start or continue the conversation about consent with the teens in your life. If you are just starting the conversations, our previous two webinars, Teaching Children About Consent and Teaching Tweens About Consent, may be helpful for you as well. I'll be giving you a lot of information and some advice about how you can approach the subject of consent with your teens. But this is your webinar. So as you're watching and listening, if you decide that some of the information won't work for you or your family or does not apply to your situation, that is totally fine. Before we begin, I would like to remind you that none of the information in this video is meant to replace professional, medical, or legal advice. In this webinar, we are going to cover a few aspects of consent for teens. Conversation tips, authentic consent, practicing authentic consent, consent and the law, how to support your teen if they've been sexually assaulted, media and consent. I understand that content related to sexual assault and sexual violence can be triggering or activating, particularly for sexual assault survivors and victims. I invite you to practice whatever care you feel is best for you. Again, this is your webinar, so you are free to go through the information at your own pace. You can watch it all in one sitting, or you can break it up over time. You're also welcome to go back and review any of the information anytime you would like. A note about age appropriateness. People develop and mature at different rates, which is why a teen's age or their grade level doesn't really give us any specific information about what it is that they're capable of understanding or what their experiences are. That's why, aside from some legal information, nothing that I'm going to discuss in this webinar is age specific. Some teens will be ready for this information earlier or later than others, and I trust you to make the call in terms of what is right for your specific teen. Now I invite you to make yourselves comfortable so we can talk about teaching consent to teens. Let's start with a few tips you can use when discussing consent with your teens. Ask a lot of open-ended questions. An open-ended question is one that requires more than just a yes or no answer. So a question like, do you think consent is important, is a closed-ended question versus why do you think consent is important, which is an open-ended question. Try to listen to your teens without expressing negative judgment. As human beings, we do make judgments and assumptions. It's part of how our brains try to sort through all of the information that we take in on a daily basis. But when you and your child are discussing a sensitive subject like consent, if you can try to avoid expressing some of the negative judgments that may come up, it can help your teen feel safer and more comfortable confiding in you. Believe what teens tell you. Sometimes we have a tendency to assume that teenagers are too young to have certain feelings or certain experiences. But if our teenager says something to us like, I have found the love of my life, they're being sincere in that moment. If we can respond by saying something like, wow, that sounds like a really big deal, we are letting them know that when they tell us sensitive information, we are going to believe them, we're going to take them seriously, and that will encourage them to keep talking to us in the future. We can also share some of our own views and experiences. Like anyone else, it can be helpful for teens to know that we've had some of the same feelings or we have been through some of the same things that they have. It's okay if you don't know, and it is okay if you make mistakes. When it comes to our teenagers, we may feel some pressure to do and say everything in the best way possible, especially when it comes to a critical subject like consent. But the reality is, if your teens ask you a question or bring up an issue and you're not sure how to respond, you can say to them, you know what, I'm actually really not sure. Let me take some time, learn a little more, and come back to you with an answer. It's also okay if you're having a conversation and it just doesn't flow the way that you were hoping. You can also say to your teen, hey, you know what? The other day when we were talking about consent, I didn't love the way that conversation went, and I would love to talk to you about it some more. Have several short conversations over a long period of time. Like many people, teens often learn more effectively when they get small bits of information over a long period of time, as opposed to getting a lot of information all at once. So rather than sitting them down for one big consent talk, consider making consent part of the everyday conversations that you have over the course of their adolescence. Also remember that consent is an essential component of other family conversations you may have about topics like healthy relationships, sexual pleasure, sexual health, and more. This webinar focuses on consent specifically, but I do invite you to seek out other resources to educate yourself and your teens about various aspects of sexuality. Things to remember from this segment: ask open-ended questions, avoid expressing negative judgments, believe what children tell you, share some of your own feelings and experiences. It's okay to make mistakes. Have many short conversations over a long period of time. Consent is one of many conversations about sexuality. You may be familiar with the following slogans, sayings, and campaigns around consent. No means no, only yes means yes, and enthusiastic consent. One reason we may latch onto these sayings is that they are catchy and they are simple, and sexual consent in concept is simple. We need a person's permission before we engage with them in a sexual way. But let's take a closer look at each one of these slogans or sayings. No means no. When someone says no to sex, that does mean no. But there are a lot of other things that a person might do or say when they don't want to have sex or they don't want something that is happening during sex. Only yes means yes. Again, people can do and say a lot of different things when they are open to a sexual experience. On the flip side, a person might say yes to sex or say yes to a certain aspect of sex, even though they don't want to do it. Enthusiastic consent. Feeling excited, eager, and confident when we want to have sex is wonderful. But people can sincerely want to have sex and still feel awkward, nervous, embarrassed, or unsure. So how do we navigate all of these complexities? I like to use a concept that I call authentic consent. That agreement comes from a sincere desire to make sure that everyone involved in the encounter is having an experience that they want. Authentic consent is agreement or permission between partners to share a certain experience. In this webinar, the experiences we're talking about are sexual, but it can apply to a lot of other experiences as well. Authentic consent does include those situations where consent is as simple as saying yes or no. It also includes situations where consent may be more complicated or less straightforward, like communication through body language. Leaning in, an open or relaxed posture, eye contact, or smiling can all indicate pleasure, enjoyment, or a willingness to continue. Pulling away, tense or close off body language, avoiding eye contact, a pained expression or an expressionless face can indicate anxiety or a desire to stop. Authentic consent also applies to situations where sex is happening with a partner who physically cannot use their voice to communicate their needs and desires and needs to communicate consent in different ways. It also involves situations where the choice to engage in sex is motivated by either curiosity, which is a sincere desire to try something sexually, even though we aren't sure how we might feel about it, or the desire to engage in sex that is motivated by generosity, which is the sincere desire to give sexual pleasure to a partner, even though we ourselves may not experience that same sexual pleasure. There are so many emotional and physical considerations that come into play during sexual encounters with others, and teens need to learn how to navigate those complexities as part of practicing consent. Things to remember from this segment. Simple slogans and sayings don't always capture the complexity of consent. Authentic consent is a sincere agreement between partners to share a sexual experience. A lot of teens are capable of thinking through some of the more nuanced aspects of consent. If you're just starting to have these conversations, here are some questions that you might ask. What do you think consent means? Why do you think so many people place a great deal of importance on consent in sexual relationships? What do you think about consent? When you ask your teen why they think it's important that everyone involved is having sex when they want, how they want, if they want, and with whom they want, some answers could include: everyone is entitled to feel safe during a sexual experience. Other people's bodies do not belong to us. If we are having partnered sex being any sexual encounter that involves more than one person. If we are having partnered sex for fun and for pleasure, that can only happen if everyone involved wants what is happening. Touching someone sexually without their consent is a crime. A lot of people have at least some understanding of what consent means. They may not be as familiar with what it looks like in practice. Pornographic and mainstream media depictions of sex rarely include realistic portrayals of consent. Often, people just sort of instinctively know what to do, and sex is something that happens wordlessly without any real communication. Meanwhile, most real-world sexual encounters happen privately, and so we rarely get to see how other people practice consent in their sexual relationships. That's one of the reasons that the idea of taking the time to communicate before, during, and even after sex may seem odd or even wrong to some people. True consent isn't simply about getting our partners to say yes so we can proceed. It's also not about assuming everything's fine until we hear the word no. Authentic consent involves paying attention to what a partner says and how they say it. Paying attention to what is happening with a partner's body. Are they tense? Are they relaxed? Are they leaning in? Are they pulling away? Are they making a face? Are they looking at you? Are they looking away? Have they gone limp? Have they gone blank? Paying attention to a partner's mood and their emotional response. Stopping, asking, and checking in with a partner regularly, particularly if we are in any way unsure of how they might be feeling in that moment. Consent also involves honesty. When people agree to engage in sex, they usually need certain things to feel safe and comfortable. That's why it's important to be honest about all aspects of a sexual encounter, not just these specific sex acts, but also what sort of relationship you're hoping to have with your sexual partner. Is it casual? Is it monogamous? Is it friends with benefits? How you feel about a sexual partner. Are you in love with them? Are they a crush? Do you have sex with no emotional attachment, etc.? Our physical and mental health needs, and of course our sexual health needs, including safer sex, and if it's applicable in our situation, our contraceptive needs. It's also great to have conversations with teens about the fact that sometimes consent can be challenging, complicated, or difficult. Just because it might be harder, that does not give anyone a pass on consent. But being real with teens about some of the potential challenges can help them realize that sometimes it does take more effort for everyone to get on the same page sexually, and that is actually pretty common. It is common and very okay to struggle with nervousness, awkwardness, or even embarrassment about our sexual desires and boundaries, to have to ask our partners what is going to feel good for them, to have to tell our partners what is going to feel good for us, to feel unsure about what is going to feel good for us, to have to change things up, slow down, or even stop during sex, to have a partner tell us no or refuse sex. One of the hardest aspects of practicing consent is facing potential rejection. When we seek permission to engage with another person sexually, We are basically saying, I want to do this very intimate thing with you that likely involves you seeing or touching parts of my body that people don't see or touch very often. Is that something you would like to do with me? If the answer to that question is some version of no, that can bring up a lot of messy feelings. Sex with other people can make us feel really vulnerable. As I just said, it often involves exposing our bodies, including genitals and other parts that we don't show to people a lot. There can also be a lot of social pressure to be good at it and to be good at it right away. That is a lot for teens to deal with, particularly when we consider that most of them are new to sexual relationships. You can let teens know that if all these aspects of consent feel like a lot, they are not alone. Even people who have been with the same partner or partners for years can have insecurities around consent. It can take some effort. That's why it's called practicing consent. But the payoff for practicing consent are sexual experiences that are fun-filled, joyful, pleasurable, and satisfying for everyone involved. I want to dive a little deeper into some of the specifics of dealing with sexual rejection and how to help your teen understand that while it isn't necessarily the most fun experience, they are capable of dealing with it. You might start by asking your teen, what is the worst thing that is likely to happen if you straight up ask someone to have sex or ask someone to do something during sex? Some of their answers may include being told no, being laughed at, being judged by their partner as weird or gross or even deviant, their partner getting angry, their partner ending the relationship or the association. You can also ask your teen how they think they might feel in one of these worst case situations. Their answers may include embarrassment, shame, or humiliation, also known as cringe. Ugh. They might feel angry. They might feel frustration or sadness. Your teen, like most of us, probably does not enjoy these feelings, and it can be tempting to try and avoid them. The problem with trying to avoid rejection is that if we are not open to the possibility that our partners do not want sex or do not want something that is happening during sex, we are less likely to pay attention and be on the lookout for those stop signals. If we aren't paying attention or acknowledging our partner's need to stop, we are pushing them past their limits, we are denying their right to decide what happens to their own body, and we are violating them. And a sexual violation can cause a great deal of pain and trauma. So teens do need to learn how to deal with the messy and sometimes painful emotions that can come from not getting the sex that they want. Some things teens or any of us can do if sexual rejection leaves us feeling frustrated, sad, anxious, embarrassed, or mad include moving our bodies. This does not have to mean running endless laps or bench pressing hundreds of pounds, although if that is a thing you can do safely, that's certainly an option. It can be as simple as taking ourselves around the block or making ourselves a sandwich. Anything to remind ourselves that our bodies are capable and worthy. Feeding ourselves. Making sure that we are feeding ourselves and staying hydrated are other important ways we can care for ourselves. Also, hunger and dehydration can exacerbate feelings of anger, sadness, frustration, anxiety, all things that are going to be even more difficult to deal with when we're in an already challenging emotional situation. Masturbating. If we're sexually aroused and carrying a lot of tension around in our bodies, and if we're okay doing so, masturbation can be a fun, pleasurable way to experience some release. Also remember that masturbation doesn't just have to be the substitution for partnered sex. It can be an important and even central part of our sexual experience and expression. Do other fun things. Sex is one kind of fun, but if that's not an option for us, we can look for other activities that leave us feeling happy, relaxed, confident, attractive, or any of the other things that we were hoping to get from sex. Talking to someone. Your teen may or may not feel comfortable talking to you about their feelings after a sexual rejection. If they aren't comfortable talking to you, you can still encourage them to talk to someone, a friend, a peer, a counselor, another caring adult, but just someone who will listen to how they're feeling so that they have a chance to process some of those emotions. Another way to minimize potential anxiety around consent and negative fallout from rejection is for teens to seek out partners who are kind and compassionate. It may be easier for your teen to talk about what they do or don't want from a sexual experience with partners they feel confident will not laugh at them, won't get angry at them, or won't judge them. Compassion and trust are things that can exist in all different types of relationship structures. They can be present in long-term and monogamous relationships. It is also possible to have compassion and trust in casual relationships and in relationships that involve multiple sexual partners. A common concern around sexual consent are mixed signals, or what to do if we aren't sure what a potential partner might want. These are some questions that I hear a lot in my work and that you may get from your teens. What if someone says no or otherwise indicates that they're not interested in sex, but I'm pretty sure that they're into it? Here we can remind teens, if somebody says no to sex or some part of sex, we need to assume that they're telling the truth. We should not push, pester, or pressure them into changing their answer. Instead, saying something like, "That's cool, but if you change your mind, I am totally into this," leaves the door open to sex without putting pressure on anybody. What am I supposed to do if my partner is really quiet during sex, or they don't seem super excited, but they aren't saying no or pulling away either? If your teen is ever unsure about how their partner feels during sex, the best thing to do is to pause and to check in. They can do this with a question like, "Are you feeling all right? Is this okay? Would you like to stop? Would you like to keep going? Would you like to do something differently?" Some people are very shy about talking or making noise during sex. And then there are people who physically cannot vocalize or verbalize during sex. So another option is to work out some sort of very clear, unambiguous physical or visual cue that partners can use during sex to indicate whether they want to stop, slow down, or keep going. I also hear these two very closely related questions a lot. What do I do if a sexual partner asks me to do something and I'm not sure if I want to do it or not? What do I do if I ask my sexual partner to do something and they aren't sure if they want to do it or not? Sometimes we aren't sure if we're going to like something until we try it. So here are some things that teens can do or discuss with their partners when they're faced with a sexual situation that is new and they aren't sure how they feel about it. They might consider taking a little time. Sometimes after a bit more thought, research, and communication, teens can have a better sense of how they feel about a new sexual situation. They can set up specific ground rules or boundaries. This can include anything from deciding how quickly or slowly they want to proceed, to establishing safe words or phrases, to making it very clear that any person can back out of the experience anytime they choose. They can leave the door open to future exploration. Your teen can let their partner know that there is no pressure, but they are open to exploring the new experience if and when their partner should ever feel ready. Finally, you can remind teens that sexual experimentation can be fun, but it does not mean that anyone is obligated to follow through on anything that does not feel good. Anyone can back out of any part of sex anytime they would like. Sexuality is fluid, and so consent needs to be fluid as well. What people want sexually changes over time, and those changes can happen within minutes, days, months, years, or over the course of our lives. Lines of communication should always be open between sexual partners so that consent can be an ongoing negotiation. Just because our sexual partners are into something at one point, it does not mean that they will be into it later, and vice versa. Most people find that their level of arousal and what feels good changes over the course of a single sexual encounter. So a touch or a type of stimulation that doesn't feel so good at one point may feel amazing 5 minutes later, and vice versa. Emotional responses can also change, and sometimes change quickly. A sight, a smell, a certain touch can change the way we feel during a sexual encounter. That's why consent also needs to involve communication during a sexual encounter. No one can know with absolute certainty how they will feel during sex, even if they have had similar experiences before. A tool that may help teens with their sexual negotiations is something called a yes, no, maybe list. This is a list of various sexual acts and situations. Beside each one is a space where teens can indicate their feelings about that particular item. Now, there are variations of these lists that exist all over the place, but oftentimes the answer key is as follows. Y for yes, this is something I would like to do. N for no, this is something I wouldn't like to do. M for this is something I might like to do, or maybe I would like to do this thing. IDK for I don't know if this is something I would like to do. NA for this is not a thing that I/we can do with the bodies that we have. The list is a helpful way for teens or anyone to identify some of their desires and boundaries. Teens can fill the list out on their own, or if they want to, they can fill it out at the same time as a sexual partner and then come together and compare their lists. Of course, the lists can change at any time, but they can be a great tool to jumpstart conversations about consent between sexual partners. I have a version of a yes, no, maybe list on my website. I will leave the link right here, and it will also be included in the resource section for this webinar. Things to remember from this segment. Talk to teens about why authentic consent matters. Consent involves verbal and nonverbal communication. Discuss some of the potential challenges of consent. Explore healthy ways to deal with feelings of rejection. Offer ways of dealing with situations where one or both partners are unsure of what they want. Age of consent laws are very specific to teens. The Canadian Criminal Code is very specific about how old youth have to be in order to legally consent to sex and which sexual acts they can consent to. Sexual acts include both partnered sex and the sharing of sexually explicit photos and videos. These are federal laws, and I will include a link to the Department of Justice's website here and again in the resource section at the end of the video. It is important for teens to understand both their legal limits and rights when it comes to sexual consent, so do go over the information with them or encourage them to review the information on their own. Things to remember from this segment. Help familiarize your teen with age of consent laws. If your teen or anyone tells you that they have been the victim of sexual violence, it's important not to say anything or ask any questions that imply that their choices, be it how they were dressed, who they were with, or what they were doing, played a role in their assault. Sexual assault survivors need the people that they care about to listen and believe them. You can assure your teen that what happened to them was not their fault and that you will do your best to support them in whatever ways they want and need. As parents and caring adults, we often want to fix things for our kids, particularly when they are in crisis and a great deal of pain. But sexual assault victims have had fundamental rights to make decisions about their bodies taken away from them. For many sexual assault survivors and victims, regaining a sense of control over their bodies and their lives is a critical part of their healing. If your teen has been sexually assaulted, you're likely very concerned about their physical well-being and their mental health. You can gently suggest that they might want to see a doctor or seek out the services of a mental health professional, but ultimately leave the decision up to them. Some people find that after an assault, being touched or examined triggers powerful memories of the assault, which can be re-traumatizing. It may be too painful for your teen to speak openly about what happened to them, even to a therapist or trained mental health professional. If your teen refuses medical attention or mental health support, accept their decision and let them know that those options are available should they change their mind later. Similarly, allowing your teen to make their own decision as to whether or not they want to file a report, make a formal complaint, or press charges can help them regain a sense of agency in the situation. Some sexual assault victims do press charges, but many do not. If you find that you're having your own emotional or psychological struggles after learning that your teen has been assaulted, know that that is very normal and very understandable. Organizations like Boost for Kids, leave the link here and in the resource section, provide a lot of resources for parents and caring adults who are supporting a child or a teen who has experienced sexual violence. Things to remember from this segment. Victims and survivors are not responsible for their assault. Believe teens who tell you they've been sexually assaulted. Let victims or survivors make their own decisions about medical and mental health care. Let victims or survivors make their own decisions about legal action. Seek support for yourself if you need it. In the Consent for Tweens webinar, I talked a lot about how new and traditional media can influence youth's ideas about what is and isn't normal when it comes to consent. Most teens spend a significant amount of their time online, watching TV and movies, reading, and listening to music. If you spend a little bit of time watching and listening along, it can provide some opportunities for you to talk to your teens about how consent is portrayed in media in both positive and less positive ways. If you'd like more ideas about how these conversations might go, check out the media segment in the Consent for Tweens webinar. Things to remember from this segment. Use media as a tool to help teens think about consent. Helping teens understand consent in theory and in practice provides a foundation that will help them build kind, compassionate, and sexually fulfilling relationships throughout their lives. Having these conversations reinforces the idea that your teen and their partners have the right to decide what type of sexual relationships they do and don't want, and that consent is an essential part of these relationships. What we've covered in these webinars is a great start, but continue talking and learning about consent with your teens. If you would like to know more about consent, please visit consent.utoronto.ca. To learn more about the Sexual Violence Prevention and Support Center and the Family Care Office, visit www.svpscenter.utoronto.ca and familycare.utoronto.ca. If you would like to learn more about my work or get in touch, you can find me on my website, NadineThornhill.com, on Twitter and Instagram at Nadine Thornhill, on my YouTube channel, Nadine Thornhill, or you can email me, info@NadineThornhill.com. Thank you so much for spending time with me. Bye. Be sure to check out our other webinars. The links can be found in the description below.